Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We will be beginning very shortly.
Yep, just give it a couple minutes so everybody can get on and join.
Hi, everyone, again. We'll just be beginning very shortly while we wait to see if anyone else is going to arrive. But just keep in mind throughout, if you have any questions, if you have any questions during the presentation, we'll have a bit of time at the end, hopefully. So if you have any questions, just think about them for the end.
And you can always put them in the chat or in the Q&A section. We see them, but we will get to them at the end, so we might not answer them in the middle, but we will leave a couple minutes at the end to answer your questions.
All right, everyone, thank you for coming today. As you know, I'm Ian.
I'm Sydney.
And today we're going to be talking about on-campus jobs and employment that you may be able to get while you are studying at university. We'll talk a bit about why it's good to get employment, how you can get employment, interviews, that sort of thing, and then talk a bit about ourselves and what we do on campus.
Okay, so I'm going to start the presentation talking about how to find jobs on campus. I know it can be a little tough for some people to find a job that they enjoy or a job they actually want to do. So I'm going to give some helpful advice about that. So your campus is probably very large and there's tons of jobs available, whether you know it or not. All of the dining halls and food service places on campus usually have positions for students. As well, if you want to assist a professor in their research, a lot of professors take research assistants. There are also positions like desk jobs at each department. On campus, I work as a student office assistant at the Slavic department, which means I sit at the front desk, answer phones, help people when they come into work and whatnot. I know my campus also has 3 or 4 different gyms on campus, and they all have different positions for people, from personal trainers to just people who run the gym. And then RA positions are resident advisors, Ian, yeah. And that's exactly what Ian does, which he'll tell you about later. And that's another position on campus that gives you a place to live, as well as some stipends and whatnot. So he'll tell you more about that. But so you should know there's just plenty of options. The first place to look for jobs on campus is on-campus job fairs. I know my campus does one, I think twice a year. They do a really big thing where you can get involved and see what there is to do on campus. And it's a good way to meet people and a good way to kind of just see and talk to people who have those jobs about their experiences. As well, flyers and advertisements are usually put up around campus. I know in the resident halls and in a lot of the classroom buildings or in department buildings, you'll have flyers advertising positions. They'll tell you how much money it is, how much time it is, and basically all the little information you need to know, and usually a contact. And you can reach out to that contact. But make sure to be aware. Sometimes they'll advertise like jobs that are kind of sketchy, like make money by selling your class notes, things like that. You want to be careful and make sure you look into the job and make sure it's a real job. And usually you want to make sure it's also on campus, because there are specific rules for international students where they can work. I know on campus, international students have no problem getting jobs, but sometimes off campus, it can be a lot more challenging. As well, there are different websites you can find jobs. I will show you on the next slide a picture of my Handshake, which Handshake is basically a website where my school uses to put all of their jobs that are open on it. As well, school websites can also have things that show different job opportunities and whatnot. And LinkedIn, I don't know if you guys have LinkedIn, but it's basically a social networking site for business. And you put a resume on there, you put your skills, your background, you make connections with other people, and sometimes you can find jobs on there. But one of the most important things, I think, when it comes to finding a job is just ask other people, your friends, your professors, your RAs, anybody else on campus. Everyone will know of something. And so if you have a friend who works at the gym and you want to get involved in a job there, ask them. So that's just probably some good places to find some jobs. So Ian, if you want to go to the next slide. This is a picture of my Handshake account. And as you can see, there's a place to search for jobs in whatever location you want. There's filters, and see, I have the on-campus filter clicked. So that'll show all the jobs that are on campus at Ohio State. For example, there's a peer mentor position, a commuter liaison, or a student assistant, or a residence life summer administrative office assistant. And you can click on all those and see kind of what they are. You see they tell you when to apply by and what kind of job it is. These are part-time on-campus student employment. So it's good to have this kind of a website available. Ian, do you have anything like that at your campus?
Yeah, my school does have LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, we have Handshake, the same website that you see right here. I really like it, and it makes it really easy to know about what kind of jobs are available on campus. And it's a really easy way of applying for those jobs as well. Because once you find what the jobs are, if you look right here, it says quick apply. When you create your Handshake account, you upload your resume and any other kind of documents that showcase who you are as a candidate for jobs. And then you just click that apply button and you get put in the contest for employment. So it makes it really easy to know and to apply for jobs.
Yeah, so and the next thing I want to talk about a little is connections. You might not realize, but who you know is a really big deal when it comes to getting jobs. So connections are actually mainly how I got my job on campus, which I'll explain at the end of this slide. But so my first advice when it comes to using connections to get a job on campus, you really want to get to know your professors and your advisors early on in your college career. These people are put on campus for you to get help, to get advice. And when it comes down to it, if they have a personal relationship with you, they will help you. So for example, professors have office hours, which are times set aside. You can go and get homework help or whatnot, but you can also go to them, get to know what they're researching. And once you become a familiar face, they'll be likely to help you. You really want them to remember you. I have currently my largest class is over 100 students. So my professor is not going to remember every student in that class. So if you go to his office hours, you go and talk to him, he'll remember you. more likely than a student who never once came to office hours. And relationships will help you in the future, especially if you need recommendations. I've had a lot of professors recently write me scholarship recommendations, but they're also very good for job recommendations because they know how you work, they know you're a good student, and so building relationships will help you with that. As well, asking your department for help. I am in the International Studies department, and say I was to go to them, I could ask them, hey, are there any international studies jobs on campus or something that I could get involved in my major? That they're also a very useful resource. When it comes to looking for research positions on campus where you could be a research assistant, that's another thing you want to ask your professors about, because usually professors on campuses do research in addition to teaching, and sometimes they'll need help, or you could even ask them, hey, do you know anybody else in this field or anyone studying this? And they might be able to help you. So you don't even have to know the person doing the research. You just have to know someone who knows the person doing the research that can help you. And like I was saying, professors really do love when students are interested in getting to know them and wanting to work with them. I've had plenty of professors who have said, you know, my office hours are open if anyone just wants to come talk or is anyone interested in doing research. And it's a good way to have connections for after college as well. When you go to the real job market, these professors can help you as well find a real job. And again, students are also great referrals. Make friends in your classes who share the same interests as you. So I take a lot of international studies classes, and a lot of people in my classes do different things on campus and off campus that I might be interested in partaking in. And so if I get to know them, I can ask them, hey, like, could you pass me along some information of your job or contact information of someone I could talk to about maybe doing a job like that? And so you really want to make a lot of friends. I work the front desk of the Slavic department, and I have a couple professors in the Russian department that I'm good friends with. And I got an email one day, and they were like, hey, we usually choose good students who are involved in the department to work the front desk. So if you'd like to come in and do an interview, we can get you a spot. And I was like, okay. So see, it was about who I knew, and I made a good impression on my professors, and I got a job. So, you know, work your hardest and make a lot of friends. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the skills it takes to get a good job. So when it comes to applying for jobs and interviewing for jobs, looking for jobs, you want to make sure you know what you're good at. So the first thing you need to do is identify your skills. The easiest way to do that is make a list, just write down what you're good at. Say you're good at leadership, you're good at communicating with others, you're good at working as a team, things like that. You want to write all those down because those will come in handy, especially in the interview process or in resume writing. You want to include all your formal skills, such as you're fluent in Ukrainian, because a lot of people don't have that. So that's a great skill to have in America. Or you're proficient in Microsoft Word, or you have a certain computer programming like award, or things like that, things you are good at that are concrete examples. But also interpersonal skills, like I was saying, leadership, listening, hard work, you're motivated, things that you can really, that you're strong with and you can focus on. So if you are having a tough time coming up with ideas of what you're good at, make sure to ask other people, because the people who know you the best, your family, your friends, they'll be able to help you see things you might not see about yourself. And once you get your list of things that you think you're good at, be sure you can talk about yourself and talk about where you got the skills and how you're developing them. A lot of times when it comes down to the interview, which Ian will talk about later, you'll have to talk about your experiences and your skills and how you got those experiences, how you got those skills. And so in advance, you do want to practice being able to talk about yourself. Some people are really not comfortable with that, but doing that will help you do your best in an interview. And the more you can talk better about yourself, the more likely you'll get the position. You want to make sure they know why you are the best person for the job. And that basically means you have to talk about yourself and talk about why you are the best candidate. And then the last thing, you want to make sure you know how your skills help you be qualified for the job and how you will be able to develop them in the job. Employers always like to hear about how you feel this position will help you grow as a human being, grow as a worker, a person, an individual. So say I'm a really qualified in leadership. So I'm going to be like, I'm a great leader because I am involved in this club on campus. I've done this for the club. That demonstrates my leadership. And this job position will help me develop my leadership skills because I'll work with others and blah, blah, blah. You want to be able to just talk about your skills in a way that shows the employer you're smart, you've thought about things, and you know what you're best at. And you want to make sure the job will be something that you benefit from because it shows your interest in the job. And so, and in addition to being able to talk about your skills, you also have to probably write them down. A resume is a very common thing in America where you basically write all your information, your education information, your leadership roles, and or participation on campus. For college, resumes tend to focus on what you do on campus. But the resumes are not always required for on-campus jobs, but they're always really good to have. If you have a resume, people will really think highly of you because it's a professional thing. You want a resume to showcase your skills, your achievements that include awards or honors or scholarships you've received, and accomplishments like your role as the president of this club or your treasurer of a club, or you do something in this organization. So a lot of things that resumes should include for college students are your major, your expected graduation date, your GPA, which is your grade point average, so basically how well you do in class, campus involvement, different leadership roles specifically. For example, I'm the co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Politics and International Affairs on campus, so that's definitely in my resume. Skills, like I mentioned, like your formal skills, like you're good at Microsoft Word, or you have fluency in Ukrainian. Those are good things to put on your resume. And then as well, resumes need to highlight your former job or internship experiences. For example, say I worked as a congressman's intern for 5 months. I want to put that on my resume. And I want to write a little bit about what I did at my former job or my former internship to kind of get the person looking to employ you, kind of get them an understanding of what you have like skills-wise and what you're familiar with doing. So here on the right is kind of a picture of what is considered a college resume. You can see there's qualifications, education, and like an academic and professional experience section. So you can see this person was a member of a call center. They did stuff for a radio. They worked at a university. They kind of have everything. And at the top, they made sure to include their contact information, their cell phone number, their email, and their full name. So when it comes to making a resume, there's some key things to remember. You want to keep it to about 1 page. It's just supposed to be your most important experiences that you want to highlight. A CV, which is another thing, a lot of like professional things include CVs, but a CV can be longer. Those are way less common, and usually they'll be asked for. You don't have to make one on your own. It's basically an extended resume that goes into depth about a lot of the things you've done. When it comes to resume building, if you have no idea where to start, online resources are very useful for formatting. Like this one right here, you could honestly copy paste it and then put all your information in it and bam, it's formatted correctly. Some majors require different things on resumes. I know my major as an international studies major has different like highlighted sections than my roommate who's a neuroscience major. So you want to make sure you kind of look at what your major is and tailor your resume to fit your major. And then you want to focus on results and outcomes. You want to focus on things you've done, things you have achieved, good things, successful things that have been completed. And using action verbs is a useful piece of advice. You want to talk more actively about what you're doing and make sure it's a very energized piece. Ian, do you have any Advice on resumes?
Not so much, but the biggest thing with a resume is that you want to keep it as short as possible, well, as concise as possible. So make your points, but don't write long sentences. Don't write, stories about your skills. Just write a very detailed, concise description of everything that you've accomplished, what kind of skills you have, the degree you want to be earning, where you've gone to school, things like that. But make sure you keep it to about 1 page.
And like you said, if you can see in this picture, they do bulleted lists of kind of what happened in the job. So like explore firm attributes and market specific factors. Like it's short, sweet, to the point about what you did. We don't need a whole story of what you did at your job. It's supposed to be short, a couple things, just to get the employer to know what experiences you have.
So I'm going to be talking a bit about American work culture, what it's like to work in an American environment. Most of this stuff is pretty general. It kind of describes all kinds of jobs in the US, but it's still applicable to the kind of work that you would be doing if you were to work on campus. And I'll give some specific examples of stuff that I've experienced working at a university as I talk about general American work culture. So just to define work culture before we start talking about it, it's how workers behave. It's the values they have, the beliefs they hold, and how they interact with each other in the workplace environment. And this can encompass a lot of things. The work week, the hours that you spend every day, every week, every month in the office, what you do with the time that you spend or that you have when you're at work, how efficient you work, what kind of relationship you have with your coworkers or with your boss, what's the kind of setting and environment in which you do your work? Do you work at a desk? Do you work remotely from a computer? And then also the kind of how ethical, religious, and political beliefs come into play in the work environment. So there's a few things about American work culture that really define it. First and foremost, I believe, is individualism. In America, workers really are seen as individuals rather than collective entities. So I may be working in an office space, but my employer will value each employee as individuals rather than looking at everyone as a collective group. There's a focus on teamwork rather than collective work. So a team is comprised of individual people when a collective is just a single entity. You don't lose your individualism when you're working in an American work environment, although sometimes that may be the case, but it's not generally how things operate. Additionally, relationships between coworkers and even between bosses is pretty informal. I call my boss by her first name. I've done that at every place that I work. I call all of my coworkers by their first names. I don't say sir or Mr. or ma'am or anything like that to my coworkers. I do say that, however, depending on what kind of job I'm doing, maybe to customers. If I'm doing something like working at a store, I would call customers sir or ma'am as a sign of respect. So there's that formal relationship you have, especially if you're doing a service job like working at a desk. You may address people with respect, but the people that you work with, the relationship is pretty informal. That being said, most people in America like their what's called work-life balance, so they don't tend to have very deep relationships with their coworkers. It depends on the kind of work environment you work in. For example, as a resident assistant, I work very closely with my coworkers in my building. I know all of them very well. I consider them to be really close friends of mine. But when I work at a grocery store, for example, my coworkers and we don't really talk outside of the work environment. So it's an informal relationship, but it's not to the point of I would consider some of my coworkers my best friends. And also in America, it's a meritocracy. What that means is that workers are rewarded for the work that they do rather than rewarded for other variables, such as nepotism or corruption really are not a huge factor in America, and especially not in the American workforce. There are cases of which, someone maybe get the promotion because they have a better relationship with the boss, but that's more along the lines of what Sydnee talked about earlier, with networking, rather than say the boss promotes his son or promotes someone who paid the boss to promote him. That kind of stuff really doesn't happen, and it's actively avoided and rooted out in American work culture. If someone is known to have gotten a job through less than meritable means, they're held to disdain, and it's not seen as a good thing at all. And that's something that I know is a lot different than maybe in Ukraine, since there are a lot of work being done by NGOs to root out corruption, especially within the political sphere. In America, that's not something that is so much seen in the work setting. Although it still does happen, it's minimalized. And then the last thing about American work culture is professionalism. You may have an informal relationship with your boss, but you still have to show them respect. You may call them by their first name, but what your boss says is generally what you are made to do. People hold themselves to high standards as well. I wouldn't turn in work that I didn't feel was complete, because I just know that that's not a good reflection of my work ability. And then in the structure and organization of companies, they're generally, unless it's a small company or like a company that recently has formed, there are generally fairly rigid structures and organizations to everything. For example, at a university, I'm a resident assistant. I have my immediate boss, and then there's the boss above her, and then above that person, and then et cetera, et cetera. I know who is the higher up. I know who is on my level of workability as well, and that's generally what can be found in most American work settings. So I just want to compare this a bit to what you may find in Ukraine. Like I am saying, this is all very general, so I'm not trying to make any statements about one country versus the other. It's just generally things that are noted to be different between what you may find in a work setting in Ukraine versus in a work setting in America. And I'm definitely not making any statements about any of you or anyone that you may know, and I'm not making statements about anyone I know here in America either. It's just generalized statements to prepare you for any differences you may find when you hopefully are studying in the United States. So in Slavic countries, something that's generally thought of occurring is sort of an apathy or indifference to what goes on in the workplace. Americans, for example, may see a constant need for improvement, even if they do their work to their best ability. Oftentimes it's seen as there's always something to improve upon. And sometimes in Slavic countries that may not be the case. One of the reasons that's typically talked about for this is just how work was seen during the Soviet era. There were constant standards that were being placed that were never really attainable, and it was often seen as no matter what kind of work was able to get done, nothing would ever actually improve. So that's where some people believe this kind of indifference towards work comes from. And in America, that's not usually the case. Additionally, most American workers are fairly ambitious. Not everyone, of course, has grand plans for their career or anything, but at the university level especially, most of the people that you'll be working with have big dreams and plans, and I think that's fair for all of you as well. Ambition oftentimes here is seen as a good thing. People that do work outside of the office, which doesn't generally happen, but people who do more work than necessary in order to improve their final outcome are often seen in high regard. And some people have written that in Slavic countries this isn't the case, because ambition or working outside of the collective was seen during Soviet times as careerism or moving outside of the party or work apparatus. So that's another difference that you may find between American and Ukrainian work culture. And then competitiveness. Competitiveness is very present in America, and pretty much everything that we do, it's not necessarily a I am better than everyone else feel, but it's more of a I know that I can constantly do better. Therefore, I'm going to attempt to do the best that I can and outdo my coworkers. It depends on the work environment that you are in. Some jobs, there is no possible way that you can, work better or have a better outcome than your coworkers. But in other cases, like for example, with me as a resident assistant, I plan events for the people that live within the dormitories. And I'll sometimes, if I know that one of my coworkers has done this event and that it went well, I will do a similar event and try to, of course, have more residents or students show up and attend. That's not that I believe that I am better than my coworker. It's just that I see that there's a possibility for improvement, and I am encouraged to do that. So we talked a bit about work culture, and it's, as I said, it's pretty generalized things. Every work environment's different, but it's kind of a cultural difference. One other, Sydney, did you want to add anything about that? Nope? Okay, perfect. So we're going to move on to our next topic, which is interviewing, the skills that you will need to interview for jobs at the university or just outside of the university in the real world. And also these are skills that you can use when if you may interview for a university. Some universities have those requirements where you have to do a person or phone interview. So these skills will help you there as well. So interviewing is your chance to showcase your skills in person or over the phone. You may, you have the resume and application, resume and application that you send in, but this is your chance to really demonstrate that on a more physical level, face-to-face or over the phone. Interviews typically have a structure. There's you sitting down and being interviewed by 1 to 3 people generally. It may be face-to-face, it may be over a telephone, or it may be over video chats such as Zoom or Skype. But generally speaking, most interviews take place in person with 1 to 3 interviewers interviewing yourself. And there's also group interviews. This is not generally done, and the only cases in which it would be are if there's a large number of applicants and they don't have the time to do a bunch of individual interviews, or if 2, there is a group aspect to the job that would require the employer seeing how you work in a team. That was the case for me when I was interviewing to be a resident assistant. I had a personal interview with 3 current resident assistants and 1 resident assistant boss. We call them resident life coordinators. So it was 1 boss and 2 workers interviewing me in person. And I had that interview, which lasted about 20-30 minutes. And then I had a group interview with about 15 other candidates for the job. And what they were trying to see is how we work together in a team to solve a problem. So they gave us an activity to do, and we all had to work together. But they just wanted to see how us as individuals work together in a team. And that takes back to the whole work culture thing I talked about. They want to know who I am as an individual and what I think and how I act as an individual. But they also want to see how we as individuals work in a team rather than stripping us of our identity or something along those lines and making us work towards a common goal. So some tips for interviewing. You probably want to take notes during the interview. They'll mention things about the job. They'll describe the day-to-day activities. They might talk about salary, pay, anything that they talk about that's applicable to the job. You might want to write down just so you know about it. And it's good to write down notes because at the end of most interviews, there's a time where the interviewers ask you if you have any questions. And you can use those notes that you've taken to ask questions about the job that will really show that you were paying attention. Interviewers really want to know that you are passionate about the job and that you're paying attention because you actually care about it. If you show up to an interview and you're just, you're like this, you're not really paying attention, they'll take it as a sign of disrespect and there's a good chance that you won't get the job. But if you're actively paying attention and actively asking questions, that'll show that you mean it, that you want it, and that'll go a long way helping your case. Put the phone away. Don't be on your cell phone or computer during the interview. If it's a phone interview and you're not there, it's harder to stay focused, especially if you're in a place that you normally don't do work. So if you are doing a phone interview or a video chat interview, I wouldn't sit in your bed. I wouldn't make yourself too comfortable actually at all. I would sit maybe in a chair, sit in a desk, but somewhere that's quiet. but you need to get in that professional mindset. So don't be looking around, don't be playing with your watch, and definitely do not have your phone out. You also want to dress professionally. You need to look the part, dress for the job you want, not the job you have, is something that I always tell my residents when I'm talking to them about applying for jobs. And I'll talk more about attire and dress for interviews on the next slide. And then come prepared. Do your research about the job. Excuse me. So if you're applying for, a resident assistant position, which I did, I talked to my resident assistant, the guy that was the resident assistant on my floor before I got the job, and I talked to him about his day-to-day duties, the structure of the organization, what he liked about the job, what he didn't. So I knew what I was getting into, and then when I sat down for the interview, I asked questions based upon those things, and it showed that I cared about the job, and then I already had some knowledge about it. So it's good to know why or what the job looks like, because then you can also tailor your skills to the job. If I know that I need to be organized, I can say, oh, well, I'm a very organized person, so this will help during the job when I need to be organized. And like Sydney was talking about, she works at the front desk of the Slavic department. She knows a whole lot about the Slavic department because she's a student within that department. So that's why they picked her for the job, because she had an understanding of how the department worked. It wouldn't make sense for Sydney to work in the Spanish department because Sydney is not a Spanish student. I know Sydney probably can actually work in the Spanish department. Sydney has a lot of wide-ranging skills, but she's a better fit for that job, and that's why she was chosen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you should wear and what you shouldn't wear. I'm so sorry. When you are applying for a job, typically you want to dress professionally, but you don't want to overdo it. So you shouldn't wear, a tuxedo or something you would see, like a famous actor wear to the Oscars or on a red carpet. That's a bit too much, too formal. You don't need to dress the best you've ever looked in your life, but you definitely don't want to dress, very casually or just in a way that makes you look out of place or unprepared for the interview. So I have these 4 examples right here. They all look very nice, their outfits are not good, but only 2 of them actually are really appropriate for an interview. And the first one that's not, and that I'll knock off, is this one right here. He's dressed a bit too casually. He's wearing jeans, sunglasses, sneaker shoes, and a t-shirt. It's a nice outfit for a day in the park, but it's not really professional enough for a job interview. That being said, though, there are some places that you would work that you don't necessarily need to dress up. Me, for example, as a resident assistant, I'm working pretty much any time I'm in my residence hall. I don't need to dress professionally in a tie or a suit every single day, but I still did wear a suit with a tie when I went to my interview, just to make myself look professional. So you don't necessarily need to wear that same kind of outfit every single day for this job, but an interview is a much more professional and formal situation than even what you might find in the office space. But it's always good to ask what you should wear before you go for an interview, or oftentimes they'll simply tell you what you should wear. If they say something like business casual, then these 2 right here in the center would be perfect. Guys, you don't need to necessarily wear a tie. Ladies, you don't need to necessarily wear a skirt or a dress. You just need to look professional. You don't want to dress too flashy either. You want them to notice you rather than the clothes you're wearing. So don't overdo it. Dress for the job. Just make sure you look respectable and professional. And the reason why this woman here on the right is crossed out, her dress is much too formal. That's good for maybe a wedding party or a very formal nice dance or dinner. But a job interview, it would be a bit too much. So also with interviewing, there's a technique that we like to talk about. It's called the STAR technique. And STAR is an acronym. It stands for situation, task, action, and result. It's a 4 5-part step to help you prepare for getting in or doing an interview to the best of your ability. So as I said, the first thing you should do before you go to the interview is prepare. And also when you are at the interview and they ask you a question, think about the STAR technique and utilize it to the best of your ability. So they'll ask you plenty of questions during your interview. Just to kind of get a feel for you and for the job, they'll ask you things. The first question I always get in an interview is, tell us about yourself. And what they want, they don't want your whole life story, for example. I'm not going to say, oh, you know, I was born in 1998 to my parents, and then we lived for 3 years in a condominium before we moved to a single family detached home unit. They don't care about any of that. So when they ask questions, you don't need to give them a whole big story, but tailor it to the job. And you can tailor it to the job by using the STAR technique. So they ask you a question. Think about it. Prepare. That's the first step. Listen to the question and think of something that you have done in your life that you can use to answer the question. So if they ask a question, for example, what was a time in which you had to deal with a situation that you had never dealt with before, and how did you handle it? I've asked that question to people when I am interviewing them for the RA position that I have. And it's always interesting to see how people react. And I can tell who uses the STAR technique and who doesn't, because first they stop and think of an event. Then they describe the situation or event that they were in, an event that or situation they had an unusual experience. Then they talk about the task. What did they have to do to fix that situation? And then they describe their action. What did they do during that situation? What skills did they utilize? What techniques did they use? How did they work with others? Things that they really care about. And that goes back, way back to what Sydney was talking about in a resume, about the active and passive skills that you have. Use the stuff you put on your resume to help you answer questions in your interview. And lastly, they close with the result. Here's what I did, and here was the result. So just to go through it all again, if someone asks you a question in an interview, you can stop, you can pause, you can think about it. You can take as much time as you would like, and you can say to them, can I think about this for a minute or 30 seconds? The interviewer will have no problem with that, because it's better to give a well thought out response than just to speak incoherently. So situation, task, action, result. Those are the steps of the STAR technique that will help you always answer questions to the best of your ability and help you always do well and succeed in interviews. So I'm going to talk quickly about my job as a resident assistant. Sydney talked earlier about her job as a desk worker at her department. And being a resident assistant, it's an on-campus job just like hers, but it's a very different kind of job. Most people don't have this kind of job at university because it is considered a pretty competitive job. But I'll talk mainly about what I do during my day-to-day. So the resident assistant position, the basic level of my job is I live in a residence hall, a dormitory. If you followed me when I took over Education USA's Instagram account, you will know what my residence hall looks like, and I talked a bit about my job as well. But I build community for all the people that live in my building, and I uphold the policies of the housing department. So I live on the floor with the people I work with, but I'm also kind of the authority figure as well. I lay down the law. I'm not a police officer. I'm not, I don't have any sort of, handcuffs or anything like that. My job is just to make sure that people are following the rules, and if not, then I document it, basically. I don't really have working hours. I'm essentially always working when I'm in my residence hall. This is good and bad. It's good because I love my job, and my job is basically to hang out with people and be friends with people. But it also means that I deal with issues at all times of the day. There's some nights that I don't get to sleep because I'm doing I could be dealing with anything from theft to emotional distress, or I could be playing board games with my residents and I lose track of time, and I end up spending half the night hanging out with friends. But I do have set times that I'm on call. I have a duty phone, and I have specific things that I have to do to make sure that everything is running smoothly in the hall. And it is hard work. I do a lot of different things, but I do get paid fairly well. I get my housing and my food covered. So those are costs that are separate from tuition, but I end up saving, excuse me, I end up saving about $14,000 a year, which is a lot of money. And it really helps me pay for my education. And that's why the resident assistant position is so competitive. It's very hard to get. Most people that apply do not even get an interview, but those who do, the interviews are very long and very notoriously hard to deal with. But you guys, if you have hard interviews, you will now be much more prepared than I was my first time, because you have the STAR technique and all the tips that Sydnee and I have given you. So that's pretty much the end of the presentation we have here. I believe we have one question that someone has asked. So I'm going to read it as well, and Sydnee and I can answer any questions that you have. Just feel free to put them in the chat or do a Q&A question, and we'll answer it to the best of our ability.
Yeah, go ahead and ask questions, and we'll answer some as they come in.
So someone asked, we talked about jobs that are obtained on place. How hard is it to get an on-campus job while applying to the university, so you already know how much it can help you to pay for your tuition? So basically, if applied to the university, is it possible to also apply for a job on that campus? And the answer to that, from my experience, would be no. You have to be an active student to apply for an on-campus job. You don't necessarily have to live on campus, but you have to actually be currently going to that school. You can look at jobs maybe off of campus if you've been accepted to a school. You know that you will be attending there. There's a chance that you could apply for jobs that are not affiliated with the university and are nearby. But that's a whole different topic that involves, your residency papers, all that legal work, and that's a whole different kind of topic. So the answer is no. If you don't currently attend classes at that university, you cannot apply for on-campus jobs.
The only exception is, I know, graduate students, if they're accepted to universities, occasionally you can be in a program where basically you agree to teach other classes of lower levels to about like freshmen or sophomores, and they will pay for a part of your schooling. So I would say that's probably the only exception. But yeah, Ian's right. As an undergraduate student, you can't come in knowing what your job will be. Even as an RA position, you usually don't apply for like an RA position until your sophomore year. And you start at your sophomore year or even junior year. So it's kind of hard. So the next question we have is, someone asked specifically, what is a research assistant and how difficult is it to work on campus and study at the same time? So a research assistant, it varies from department to department. Say you're working in biology as a research assistant. You're probably going to be helping run tests on different things. You're going to be in a lab. You're going to be recording different data, stuff like that. If you're a research assistant to a political science professor, you might be going to the library, grabbing books for the professor. You might be reading books and getting information and sharing that with the professor. You might be doing a lot of book work and library work versus lab work. So it kind of just depends, but a research assistant basically helps involve in the research process that a professor is doing. So assist the professor in whatever they need while doing their research. Let's see, someone said, is there any differences for small and large colleges? When it comes to jobs, I would say the only difference would probably be types of jobs. My college also has a hotel right on campus. We have an events like arena we have a giant basketball arena. So like you could work at the hotel, that's considered on-campus working, or you can work at the event center and help set up for events, or you can work at the basketball arena and set up for the hockey games versus basketball games. Those kinds of things, you have to have those facilities. But we also have, I think, a botanical garden you could work at on our campus, in different museums. We have a lot at Ohio State because we're a huge school. But so that might be a little bit different. But usually when it comes to a job, the jobs themselves aren't going to be treated differently just because of a large school or a small school.
It actually might. Another difference is, Sydnee mentioned the facilities. There might be a difference of the number of jobs available. A larger school probably has more jobs that they can fill. A smaller school would have less jobs, but that also means that there would be more candidates for a job at a larger school than at a smaller school. And at a smaller school, typically it's easier to make those kinds of connections with students and professors that will help you get jobs. So, it's a trade-off, but you can't really make any large definitive statements because it does vary school by school and job by job. But generally speaking, large schools would have more jobs available. Smaller schools have less jobs available, but they may or may not have more or less applicants depending on the size as well. So Oleg asked, do you know any international students working off campus, and what are the factors influencing whether you can or cannot work off campus as an international student? So I myself don't personally know any international students working off campus, but I do know that that's something that would be an option for international students. As to the factors that would influence that, visas, etc., I definitely do not have enough understanding of the visa process to answer that definitively. And that's something that I would ask your Education USA advisor, or if you are already in that process of applying for visas, something that I would utilize the resources available at the American Embassy to get a better understanding of work possibilities while studying abroad. Sydnee, do you know anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, I know my school's website offers a page for international students, and they offer an international student office. So if you are interested in certain schools, you could probably ask them specifically what kind of things are, required or whatnot. The website's definitely helpful. And I would say speaking to someone, whether it be Education USA advisor, an embassy worker, or someone at a university, they could probably give you the best information. I know, speaking to Liz about it, I know, for example, like on-campus work is pretty solid. Like international students can work in most every job. They might have to fill out 1 or 2 extra forms, but that's about it. Off-campus, not entirely sure what all the different rules are.
Yeah, like with on-campus jobs, if you already are at the university attending, there's no other legal thing that would prevent you from working. The only problem that you may have is just how you would receive payment. And that would just be really a difference of international banking.
As well, like it goes into taxes and retirement plans. There's a lot of things that are factors into that. So that's probably why it's such a difficult.
But on-campus jobs, you would have no problem applying. Off-campus jobs, it depends on factors that we're not really prepared to talk about. The reason we don't want to give you any advice on that is because I don't want to say the wrong thing and then lead you down the wrong path. Of course, no problem. Any other questions from anyone?
Okay, if you're working on campus and studying at the same time, is it possible to join a club at the university? Wow, I forgot to answer your question earlier. Sorry about that. No, it's definitely doable. I only work about 8.5 hours currently. Sometimes I'll work 10, just, whatever, but never below 8 hours a week. When it comes to college classes, I take 15 credit hours right now, and I have a lot of free time. Some people have 18 hours, which is about the max you can take, and so they have a little bit less free time, but I'm very good at managing my time, and my job luckily gives me the opportunity at the front desk to do my homework if we have nothing going on. So it's really doable. I'm involved in, I think, 3 other clubs on campus, and I have this internship, I have a job, and I also go to the gym every day. So I definitely have time, and I also get like at least 8 hours of sleep. So it's definitely doable. If you're working more of a intense full-time job, kind of like Ian's, you're still going to have time to do a club. You're still going to have time to do things on campus. But his is a lot more of involvement than mine.
Yeah. So I can speak a bit to my situation. First off, most on-campus jobs are fairly flexible with their schedules. Most
they
jobs
work around your class schedules too. Like I send to my boss every semester, I send my class schedule, and he says, all right, can you work these times? Is that good for you? And I'm like, yep, sure.
And oftentimes you can switch with other people that work at your office space too. You're not going to be the only person who works a certain job. And most on-campus jobs, in my experience, are not only flexible with the hours that they give you, but allow time for you to do homework or just kind of have a leisure time. You're not usually doing very intensive work if you're working on campus. They know that you're students. You're always going to be a student first, and for an on-campus job, it never should get to the point that the job is hurting your ability to study. In my case, I do my resident assistant job. I'm working a lot, but I am still involved in other organizations, other clubs. I'm the president of the History Society here on my campus. I'm on the Dean's Advisory Council for one of the colleges. I'm pretty involved on my campus. The only way it's possible is because I really do have to manage my time very well. It's not always easy, and sometimes I maybe lose a couple hours of sleep. And I also do take 18 credits, so I'm taking pretty much the most amount of classes available. Next year, I've decided I'm going to cut back a little bit. I'm only taking 15 credits because I would like to have more free time to read or sleep. But most people don't have any sort of issues. The only reason I'm like that is because the resident assistant job, in terms of on-campus jobs, generally is probably the most time-consuming. But even then, it's really all about time management and what you decide to do with the time that you have. But generally, again, most on-campus jobs are very flexible with their scheduling and are not too time-consuming.
Any last minute questions? We have time for a couple more if anyone has anything. I think me and Ian both really like our on-campus jobs. For me, it's been good because I've gotten to meet more of the faculty in my department, and it's really a benefit because we just had scholarships that were like announced through the department, and there's two of us that work the front desk, and we both applied for the scholarships and we both got them. But I mean, hey, we're the most qualified candidates, and they can attest to our work skills. So they know how hardworking we are and deserving of a scholarship we are. So it comes with its perks.
And we get paid too. You do get paid for the work that you do. You're not volunteering anytime. So it's nice to be able to get money while you're also studying for school, because it does help with expenses. Even if you're not paying your tuition with the money you make at an on-campus job, it helps if you ever need to spend money outside of campus.
Yeah, that's definitely a plus. Having an income, because I didn't work my first 2 years of college. I was a student athlete the first year. Then last year, I just didn't want to. So actually, like, having a way to make money, and I have extra spending money, things I didn't expect to have, like, it's really nice because I can do things I probably wouldn't have done otherwise because I have more money. All right, anything else? Oh, okay, cool. Maybe can you tell us something about assistantships for graduate students? What are the main differences with on-campus jobs?
So it would definitely depend on what kind of assistantship it is. It would depend on the graduate program. It would depend on the professors that you're assisting, whoever is in the department or in the program that you would be doing work for. And it does depend on the school as well. Different schools offer different things to graduate students who are doing assistantships. I know some of my friends and people that I know who have applied and gotten into graduate school. Some of them have been offered graduate assistantships that cover the full cost of their graduate education. So they're going to grad school for free because of the assistantship position that they got. I know that that's not always the case for graduate students, but it would be different from an on-campus job in that it would be something that you would do every single day for the most part. It would play probably a much more time-consuming role than maybe like if you work 4, 5, or 6 hours during your on-campus job as an undergraduate or as a graduate student. Having an assistantship would be a lot more time-consuming, but it would be, ideally, it would be tailored to the graduate program that you're in. So if you're doing a graduate program in political science, ideally your assistantship would be in the political science department or school, whatever. So you would be doing research work that would tailor to what you are doing for graduate studies.
Yeah, like I can give an example. For example, the Russian department has grad students who are assistants, but they teach classes fully on their own. They teach entry-level Russian as their own standing professor, and they get a lot of their college paid for. Versus then like the political science department, I take a class where it has a professor and then 2 teaching assistants, and those are both grad students. And the professor teaches the first half of the class, then he gives the class over to the teaching assistants, and they help run like a question and answer session about the readings we did for class. They handle a lot of the information, like this is when your grades are going to be in, this is when the test is. They give a lot of the helpful information about like specifics of the class. The professor does like specifically just teaching, and they kind of handle everything else. And like correspondence wise, I'll email them if I have a question about a reading or an exam or something, because they're usually a lot more like available, because sometimes professors are a lot more busy in their own research. So the TAs are kind of a way to like, handle all the students. It all just kind of depends, because I know I had a graduate assistant in another class in the earth science department, and she was there like just to grade our papers, but she does her own complete research thing. Like she does research all day long. So she comes to our class just to grade papers. And so it kind of just depends, like Ian said, on the department and what you're doing. And also the school and where you get accepted. They'll pay for some of it. They'll pay for all of it. It really just depends into the specifics.
And as you're looking at graduate programs to apply for, or that you may have already gotten into, it would be wise to contact the department or the school that you are doing your graduate studies in and ask them about the graduate assistantship positions that they have. And the sooner you do that, even if you are not sure if you're going to be applying to that school or not, it's wise to find out that information, because it may be something that you apply for simultaneously as you apply for the graduate program, or it may be something that you don't apply for until you get there, and they can give you specifics about the benefits and other things involving the position. Yeah, so if nobody else has any questions, we're pretty much all done here.
Thanks for joining. I hope you learned a little bit about on-campus jobs.
Mm-hmm. All right, everyone, thank you all for coming. Best of luck as you apply for on-campus jobs.